Hi, I'm Skip Nipper. Welcome to Skip's Corner, the podcast where I tell you about not only Nashville's great baseball history and traditions,
shot to right, a one-hop liner,
but certainly about its past. And you will hear a little bit about its present and future, too.
Yes, he can. It makes the waist-high catch.
There are great stories about Tom Wilson Park, Herschel Greer Stadium, Sulphur Dell, and the players, coaches, and fans who love everything about baseball. And every once in a while, you will get to hear from a special guest who will share their fondness and even passion for the great game.
The high fly ball down the right field corner, going way back, hits a lead-off home run.
The 1962 Nashville Old Timers Banquet was held on January the 29th at the Noel Hotel. I've been a member of the Old Timers, I think, since about 2005. Dad and I went in together back then, and it's been a real joy to be a part of that. I love to read the history. So I've run across a story I want to tell you about. This one in 1962, then I'll take it a little further than that. Expected to attend the event were Kirby Farrell, and he did. He was from Henderson, Tennessee. And he'd recently been named the Minor League Manager of the Year for the third time by the Sporting News. Now, Kirby Farrell had one season as the manager with the Cleveland Indians. And if you remember the story about Herb Score, who was a phenomenal pitcher, was hit in the eye from the pitcher's mound and never played again, became a broadcaster, I think. Well, Kirby Farrell was his manager. Now, Nashville's Red Lucas was to be honored as the outstanding Nashville Vols player of the past, which they did in those days. They had not started naming amateur Hall of Fame players yet. But he was a former Major League pitcher, and so was Johnny Beasley, who was from Nashville. And the speaker was to have been Lindsey Nelson. A lot of you remember that name, especially if you're a Tennessee Vols fan. He was born in Pulaski, Tennessee, was a graduate of the University of Tennessee, and that's where the Vols ballpark is named for him. Now, Lindsey Nelson broke into broadcasting in 1948 and became the first announcer for the Vol network and had a distinct voice, and later became the lead voice for the New York Mets and the San Francisco Giants, and often the Cotton Bowl, CBS radio broadcasts. Gosh, he had many television and radio assignments over the years. And he was also known as an excellent speaker on the banquet circuit. But he was forced to cancel just a week before the banquet, and I wonder if he declined because he was in talks to call games for the Mets, who would be playing in their inaugural National League season that spring, and he was the broadcaster. So instead, the Old Timers Board of Directors acquired the services of a virtual unknown out of baseball circles. His name was Larry Getz. Goetz. He had been a National League umpire for 24 years, and he was persuaded to fill in. Getz resided in Cincinnati and was regarded as one of the best baseball storytellers around, too, just like Lindsey Nelson. Now, let me tell you about him. Lawrence John Getz started umpiring in the Bluegrass League in 1920. And he also umpired in the Western Ohio League, the Piedmont League, and the American Association. And he then became a successful National League umpire from 1936 through the 1957 season. He worked in 3,218 games and was an umpire in the 1941, 1947, and 1952 World Series. And he was an alternate for the 1940 World Series, as well as working the 1939 Major League Baseball All-Star Game. He was also a home plate umpire for Vern Bickford's no-hitter on August 11th, 1950. And get this, he was one of the umpires in Norman Rockwell's famous painting, Bottom of the Sixth, along with Beans Reardon and Lou Jorda. You might remember seeing it with three umpires looking up the sky, with one holding his hand out to check for rain. Now, Getz was known for being a strict disciplinarian and not taking arguments from players, and as a result, he earned their respect. But he was dismissed in 1957 by National League President Warren Giles, having been inactive the previous season due to an illness. And the discharged arbiter had been critical of the National League because of the refusal by the league to include umpires in the retired players' pension fund. And I'm sure that changed many years later. And in his last years, he served as a commentator for the Mutual Broadcasting Company and had made appearances on local Cincinnati radio programs. Now, he died in his native Cincinnati at the age of 67, following a heart attack survived by his widow, Helen. And it was only 9 months after speaking in Nashville at the Old Timers Banquet with 175 attendees. Well, enough about Getz. Sam Smith, president of the South Atlantic League, was also at the banquet. And why, you might ask? Because the Southern Association had folded only 5 days before the banquet. And Smith was wooing Nashville to come into the Sally League, the South Atlantic League, for 1962. You see, Birmingham had decided to pull its club over the use of Negroes, and Nashville had actually lost its affiliation with the Cincinnati Reds a few years before because the Southern Association had an unwritten rule that Negro players were not able to play. But the Detroit Tigers, the Barons' major league affiliate, had little choice but to associate with Nashville should the team and league stay in business in '62. Well, it didn't stay in business. It went to the South Atlantic League to woo Nashville once again. But even though that did not happen, Detroit had already assigned a manager for the Nashville Ball Club, and he attended the Old Timers Banquet too. You may not know him, but if you're a baseball fan and have read stories about the old days, viewed photographs, especially black and white ones, or heard crazy stories, legendary events over the years, then you have seen the new manager for the Nashville team plenty of times. His name, Bob Swift. Who, you might say? Well, let me tell you about him, and then I'll tell you where you may have seen him before. Robert Virgil Swift, I like that name, Virgil, was born on March the 6th, 1915, and he was an American professional baseball player, coach, manager, and scout. He played in Major League Baseball as a catcher, standing 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing 180 pounds, and he threw and batted right-handed. A native of Salina, Kansas, Swift played 14 consecutive seasons beginning in 1940 in the big leagues and all or parts of 22 years in pro baseball until 1956. And during his big league career, he was with the Browns, the St. Louis Browns from 1940 to 1942, the Philadelphia Athletics in 42 and 43, and the Tigers, the Detroit Tigers from 1954 to 1953, and appeared in 1,001 games and hit .231. Not known for his hitting, he was primarily a second-string catcher, although he started 83 of the 1945 World Champion Tigers official American League games. Swift became a coach and minor league manager upon the end of his Major League Baseball playing career, coaching for the Tigers in 1953 and 1954, and then again from 1963 to 1966, but also the Kansas City Athletics in 57, 58, and 59, and 1 year with the Washington Senators. He was a coach in 1960. During the 1959 season, Swift filled in for Kansas City manager Harry Kraft when Kraft missed 15 games due to illness, and the Athletics won 10 straight games and went 13-2. But Swift, curiously, was bypassed at season's end when the A's changed managers. Now, going back to Nashville, Swift did not manage the Vols in 1962. Do you remember why? The team went out of business, and there was no professional baseball at Sulphurdale for that season. And Swift was signed by the Tigers as a scout, a position he had held previously. Now, after that '62 season, he was in his second stint as a Detroit coach in 1965 when manager Chuck Dressen, who had been a manager of the Nashville Vols in the 1930s, there's another Nashville baseball connection, was failed by a mild heart attack during spring training. And as acting manager, Swift led Detroit to a 24-18 record until Dresden was able to return to duty on May the 31st. The next season, on May the 16th, 1966, Dresden suffered his second heart attack in as many seasons, and again, Swift took the reins. But in mid-July, with the Tigers 32-25 under his command, Swift fell ill, and he was hospitalized during the All-Star game break for what appeared to be food poisoning. But sadly, tests revealed, however, that Swift was suffering from inoperable lung cancer. And Coach Frank Scaff took over July 14th as the team's second acting manager and finished the campaign. And 3 months after stepping aside, on October the 17th, Bob Swift died in Detroit at the age of 51. His record in 65 and 66 as an interim manager was 56 wins and 43 losses. Now, let me tell you where you have seen him before, because I know you've been wondering that. Well, you won't actually have seen his face. Well, not at least all of it, but it's him anyway. Swift is pictured in one of the most famous photographs in American sporting history. He was the catcher for the Detroit Tigers on August the 19th, 1951, when St. Louis Browns owner Bill Veeck sent midget Eddie Goodell to pinch hit during an actual Major League Baseball game. And the stunt occurred in the second game of a doubleheader at Sportsman's Park. Goodell was allowed to bat when the Browns showed the umpires a legitimate baseball contract issued by the American League office. And Swift knelt on the ground to receive pitcher Bob Kane's offerings. It is this kneeling stance that is captured in the photo. Swift has his eyes closed with the mitt held high and a baseball in it, high above the small batter. Goodell was given a base on balls, and he was replaced at first base by a pinch runner, and he never appeared in another big league game again. But I'll bet when you see that picture again, you'll remember the catcher, Bob Swift, and his famous pose, and wonder what kind of year it would have been for the 1962 Nashville Vols with him as the manager.